Hello there. Good to see you. Um, Glad it's Wednesday. Glad I've remembered to do a thought for the day for Wednesday, and glad you're here too. Um, and we've got actually more than one thing to talk about, but I'll try and remember by the end of it. But I'm wanting to start with this again. I've only done this once before. I found an article and I just read it out. I try and sort of bring in, scripture and try and bring in my own thoughts, may end with a prayer. You've seen it. You know what I'm doing. This is another one where I guess the preface is simply this. A great many of you would have grown up in homes where there were people who didn't go to church, but you just went. Clearly, that's no longer the case. We live in an age where people are skeptical, and if they're not straightforward atheists, they certainly have a level of agnosticism and cynicism that you must engage with. Most of us feel a wee bit intimidated. We'll hopefully come on to some of the kind of stuff that you might say to folks who question you. I mean, that's obviously what we've been doing. How does a loving God allow a pandemic to happen? So there's that kind of apologetics understanding of the fact that if we go to church, we're supposed to share our faith, but we're supposed to engage and listen to what people are saying and complaining about and have problems with. But what's also important is just to catch a feel for what it's like to not go to church, not believe, suddenly engage with stuff, and then think, I think this might be true. And so this is, there's a website called Eternity. It's actually based in Australia. So it's not British, it's not European, it's not American. It's actually quite handy sometimes just to get a different perspective. So it's not wildly different. And I'm quoting it simply because it kind of feels real. This is from the 25th of August. So just last week. And it's just a really, really lovely story. This is a woman just recounting her perspective on church. For most of my life, I was adamant that I would never have anything to do with Christians or the church. My parents were atheists and they didn't like Christians. They said the church was rubbish and a money-making thing. In our house, it was almost like my father was the God and he had to be revered and obeyed in everything. So as a teenager, I was an angel. Not a Christian one, but an angel nonetheless. I was too scared of being hit if I did something wrong. But when I was 26, my mother died of bowel cancer. Before that, I hadn't known anyone who had died. When I heard the news, I cried a lot. The funeral was in a church, but the person running it didn't do a lot of God bothering. I feel like apologising on behalf of all people doing funerals, but there we go. It's just a lovely phrase, didn't do a lot of God bothering. So that was good. And afterwards, I went back to work and I got on with it. Over time, though, I started to have more questions, especially after our children were born. What happens when we die? What would happen if I died? It worried me a lot. Then, when our eldest daughter was in kindergarten, she made a friend whose family went to church. They invited her to the kids' club at their church. It was free, and I was a busy mum of two children, and so I let her go. At the end of the day, I went to pick her up, and I looked inside the room. That's when I saw it. Everyone looked so happy. The children and the leaders. I was quite surprised. I started to think that maybe something that makes people happy can't be all that bad. For the rest of that year, I didn't think much about it. But then in the January holidays, the church put on a kids club again, and the girls went again. At the end of the week, we were invited to the Sunday service. Ringing any bells? It seems kind of like a parallel. And I actually went to church for the first time ever with my husband and daughters. It actually wasn't that bad. You just think it's lovely. It's such a shock. The bar is set so low when people come to kind of expectations of what it is going to be like when you go to church. And there's a famous quote from Treasure Island author. Oh, I've forgotten. Treasure Island, a famous Scottish author that everybody will remember, but I've forgotten. I remember to do the thought for the day. Don't get pushy. Just be happy that I'm here. The, I'm trying to remember his name and I can't remember. Anyway, that author, I remember there's a quote from him. He kept a diary and he says, went to worship this morning, was not overly depressed. It's like such a low expectation. So I just think that's really, really nice. It actually wasn't that bad. We quite liked it. The people were friendly. Can't remember anything that they said, but afterwards we talked to people at morning tea, and then we started going regularly to church. I bought a Bible, but I never really looked at it until I met a Christian at the local gym. That was the turning point. He was an elder in his church, and he was really easy to talk to. After a while, I told him about my mother dying, and then I asked him all my other questions about faith and dying and the Bible. People don't sign up without asking questions, not in this generation. Somebody has to listen. Could that be you? A few months later, my husband and I started going to his church, and that's where it started to make sense. The minister explained the Bible, said it was made up of 66 books, and the Old Testament and the New Testament are different. He explained that Jesus is the Son of God and that he died and rose again so that we could belong to him. It was good, but I still didn't get it, particularly the forgiveness thing. I had so many issues with my father, I really struggled to forgive him. And then one day we watched The Prodigal God by Tim Keller. Tim Keller. If you have been paying attention, that name should not be a surprise to you. But if it is, don't forget it. I realized that for all those years, I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just worried about dying. And that was when I realized that it was God who was looking for me. And I understood forgiveness for the first time. I understood that Jesus did this for me. I forgave my father, and it freed me. It felt like a weight off my shoulders. And then there's just a quote, Luke 15, verse 32. Again, Luke 15 should be a ding dong, because Luke 15 has got the lost sheep, it's got the lost coin, and here, the lost son. He was lost and is found. Just wanting to point out one crucial thing. People nowadays invariably have questions, and questions should be okay. Moreover, if people ask you questions, you don't necessarily have to have all the answers, but you certainly have to listen. And you have to go and find somebody who does have some answers. And you have to maintain the conversation as long as it takes. As you can see, there was a holiday club, and then there was a service, and then there was a conversation with somebody at the gym, and then there was church attendance, and then there was more explanation and more. It's never just one thing. There's a whole series of things that just bring people closer and closer. It's not rocket science. You don't win every time, but the more we do it, the better we get, and the more often people engage and ask more questions. I've got a question. After the Sunday service, I got an email thanking me for the service on grace and the sermon on grace, but just noting the fact that the person was an unrepentant Pelagianist. I'm not going to say this, not pronounce it correctly. Pelagius. So he was born in Britain in 354 and died in Palestine in 418. And he was a theologian. I'm just saying this because you've got homework this morning. You have to find out who Pelagius is, and the fact that we have somebody in our congregation who is unrepentantly following Pelagius, you know who you are. It was really just to find out who knows what that is. I mean, I do, and I did before I looked up the Wikipedia. I just remember, I got that, remember that heresy, but it was more just find out, because it was how some people reacted to the Sunday sermon on grace, and sometimes it's just nice to kind of follow a wee ferret down a hole and see where it all goes, because people have always had problems with grace, and people have always had a worry that grace is too easy and too simple, and really things should be a wee bit tougher. So you've got homework, and you've got to think about what the friends are that you have to talk to and listen to. And the other thing you have to do is go with God, because he goes with you. Bye.